Well, there's good news for you. Even though the pancreas is a hard organ, I have a meeting in an hour, so we will get this done within 1 hour time frame. Okay, so the pancreas, it's not only an endocrine organ, it's both endocrine and exocrine. Let me write it. Endocrine, as you know, meaning it produces hormones that travel through the blood, and exocrine, has exocrine, different exocrine cells, and the exocrine cells of the pancreas secrete digestive enzymes. And digestive enzymes don't travel through the blood. Digestive enzymes travel through the digestive system, and they are meant to break down food. And so you'll notice the location of the pancreas. It's on the left-hand side of your body, exactly where on this side over here. The stomach is in front of it. It's showing you the stomach. So food goes through the stomach, out the stomach, and into the small intestines. Well, the exocrine portion of this pancreas, we have the head right here and the tail of the pancreas here. You don't see it in this picture, but at the tail of the pancreas, we have the spleen, and that's about how those organs go. But these, notice they have ducts inside the pancreas, and the purpose of those ducts, the pancreatic ducts, is to allow the digestive enzymes that are made in these guys, called the acinar cells, acini. This is the adjective form. They make the digestive enzymes, and you know that exocrine glands secrete substances into a duct. And so through that duct it will go, and all of the digestive enzymes from the acini, the acinar cells, will enter this duct and be squirted out here into the small intestines. That's how that goes, the exocrine portion. The endocrine portion, we have, if we look on a slide, all of these are the digestive cells that are making the digestive enzymes, and then they dump their stuff into the ducts for digestion. It's this guy right here that we're particularly interested in. This is called an islet of Langerhans. Islet of Langerhans. And the islet of Langerhans is made up of two different types of cells. We have alpha cells and beta cells. The beta cells secrete insulin, and I remember that because beta plus I makes a word. Alpha cells make glucagon. So like egg, this is hard stuff to learn. So alpha cells make glucagon, beta cells make insulin. And so this islet of Langerhans is made up of alpha cells and it's made up of beta cells. And we have done glucose regulation quite often in our series, like last semester. And the reason we do that is to learn negative feedback, and it's just easier to learn it before you get to this term. So we're going to talk about blood glucose regulation here in just a little bit. Here's what these islets of Langerhans really look like if you're lucky when you're looking at the pancreas. That is a clear difference between the staining of these guys with the alpha and the beta cells than these acinar cells here, all of this. So you're going to need to be able to describe the negative feedback of glucose via insulin and glucagon for this next test. Do you all remember that? Well, let's go ahead and answer these questions. Which cells make insulin? Beta cells. Which cells make glucagon? Alpha. What are the islets of Langerhans? They are the endocrine portion of the pancreas that contain the alpha and the beta cells. So let's talk about this negative feedback of blood glucose levels. We try to share. This is always so awkward now, trying to get to the whiteboard since they've made it better. Let's see. Okay. So first of all, first thing that happens in blood glucose regulation, if we eat a meal, wow. We eat a meal, what's going to happen to our blood glucose levels? Well, blood glucose levels will go up because we're taking that food that we've digested inside the digestive system, and we're taking the nutrients and putting it into the blood. And one of those nutrients is glucose. So we increase our blood glucose levels. What happens next? Well, when your blood glucose levels go up, your pancreas detects this. And what does it release? I hope you're screaming right now, insulin. Insulin is our only hypoglycemic hormone. It's going to make our blood glucose levels go down. And the way that it does that is insulin's target cells, the cells that have receptors for insulin. When insulin docks on those target cells, it tells the cells to take the glucose out of the blood and put it inside the cell. And because you can't be two places at one time, our blood glucose levels are going to drop. So first of all, insulin targets the body cells. Most all body cells have insulin receptors. And they also, now, while the liver cells are part of the body, I'm adding those in here, and the liver cells. Technically, liver cells are definitely body cells, but they do two different things. The body cells take glucose in to make ATP for aerobic respiration. Take glucose in. And the liver cells, they do take glucose in for aerobic respiration, but at the same time, they also store glucose as glycogen. Glycogen is the storage form of glucose. Take glucose in. Liver cells store glucose as glycogen. As glycogen. I'll make a concerted effort here. As glycogen. And then that way we have some stored glucose for a rainy day, right? So by the body cells taking the glucose out of the blood, putting it into the body cells, the liver cells take the glucose out of the blood, put it inside the liver cells and store it as glycogen. That causes our blood glucose levels to drop. Very straightforward if you've been introduced to this idea before. If not, it takes a little bit of memorization. If you skip a meal, what's going to happen to your blood glucose levels? Well, they are going to drop, or in the middle of the night, they're going to drop. And we have cortisol to help with that. But if we skip a meal and those blood glucose levels drop, it's the same organ. It's the pancreas that's going to detect. And it releases a different hormone. This time, it releases glucagon. Glucagon. Notice how glycogen and glucagon seem very similar, different words. Glucagon is a hormone. Glycogen is the storage form of glucose. So the pancreas detects and releases glucagon, and then the glucagon will target the liver cells. Targets liver cells. And what are the liver cells storing? Glycogen. When the glucagon attaches to the liver cells, it tells the liver cells to break down glycogen. And that process is called glycogenolysis. Lysis means busting up. So we're busting up the glycogen. And glycogen really looks like this. Here is one glucose molecule. And here's another glucose molecule. And if we're inside the liver, we're stored with a little covalent bond. And it just looks like a big, huge chain of glucose. So during glycogenolysis, if we break these bonds, we're releasing individual blood glucose levels into the blood. So step 5 would be glycogenolysis. And what does that lead to? I'm dropping down here for number 6. And then your blood glucose levels go up. If you're new to this class and you don't know about blood glucose regulation, first of all, let me know. And second of all, practice this. This is something you have to know cold immediately, right? Because of all the people with diabetes and hypoglycemia, and issues like that, insulin resistance. What else was I going to say about this? I'm going to stop sharing if I can. Yes, I want to continue. Oh no. Well, this is not working out for me. I really don't like this whiteboard situation here. And if I close this, we'll see. Help me escape. I'm going to pause the recording. Just like that, and 15 extra steps, I'm back to where we're supposed to be. They couldn't make it any harder for those of us teaching online and recording the way we're recording. What is it about insulin? Insulin is our only hypoglycemic hormone, meaning a hypoglycemic hormone will decrease, its whole purpose is to decrease blood glucose levels. So what would some of the triggers be for insulin release? Well, first of all, quite obviously, these are humoral. These first two are going to be humoral stimuli, meaning it's not hormonal and it's not neural. If we have elevated blood glucose levels, that will stimulate the release of insulin, but also if we have elevated amino acids and fatty acids, that will also stimulate the release of insulin because our cells can make glucose from non-carbohydrate products. And then we have the parasympathetic innervation, which I mentioned in one of the first videos. The parasympathetic innervation of the pancreas is through the vagus nerve, and the vagus nerve is that cranial nerve number 10, correct? And it's the only one that goes all the way down, the only cranial nerve coming straight off of your brain that's going to come down, and it's going to innervate your organs. And very specifically, this vagus nerve carries all the parasympathetic fibers to the digestive system so we can actually digest our food. And one of its targets, the parasympathetic innervation, would be the pancreas to cause the release of insulin. Now, the effects are to lower blood glucose levels, and it does this in a variety of ways. First of all, we've already said we take up glucose. Your body cells take up glucose, and you're making glucose into glycogen. So what we don't want to do is it will prevent the liver from breaking down any glycogen that it already has, and it also prevents the production by the liver and the kidneys of new glucose. Here's what you have to remember for the rest of your life, but those are some extra details. What insulin does is it promotes protein synthesis and fat storage. If you take in just the right amount of glucose, then you're going to use that amount of glucose, but any excess glucose will pour over into glycogen production and storage in your liver and in your skeletal muscle cells. And then anything over that will be produced into fat in the body. So those are the effects. It's probably a little more than you need to know, but it's really important to understand how insulin works because in a normal body, because then we have these homeostatic imbalances. So the different types of diabetes. Now we've already done diabetes insipidus when we did the posterior pituitary. Diabetes insipidus has to do with ADH. It does not have to do insipidus. It's a disorder with ADH. You're not producing ADH, and so you don't retain water, so you lose a lot of water through urine. In diabetes mellitus, this means like honey, like sweet, because back in the day, people used to taste urine to see if it was sweet, to see if there was any sugar in it. Yes, I do. Just going to stop right there and say that here are the different types of diabetes. You can have gestational diabetes. That means you develop diabetes during pregnancy. And about the only thing I'm going to say about this is if you develop gestational diabetes, you are prone later on in life to develop type 2 diabetes, and you need to watch out for that. Just assume with gestational diabetes, what ends up with gestational diabetes is you have this insulin resistance and you have a glucose intolerance, basically. It shows you that your body is intolerant to glucose. And if you do not get gestational diabetes treated, then you end up with a massively large baby. And so what they do during your pregnancy is they test your ability to your glucose tolerance, basically. So they give you this thing to drink, and then they take your blood sugar levels, and then if you fail that part of the test, then you do it over for a longer period of time. And what's interesting about that is if you fail the first part and pass the second part, they'll say that you don't have gestational diabetes. I recommend that you tell anyone who fails one part of that test to treat themselves as if they have gestational diabetes and if they're going to and as if they will develop type 2 diabetes unless they lead a proper lifestyle. Having gestational diabetes overall, you end up with a very large child. You can have these 11-pound babies, 12-pound babies, 13-pound babies. And when the babies are born, it's hard for them to manage their own blood glucose levels. So it's not something that we want. In type 1 diabetes, this used to be called insulin-dependent diabetes. This is an autoimmune disorder where your body literally wipes out those beta cells and you can't make insulin. So in type 1 diabetes, you are insulin dependent. You have to take insulin shots because you do not make insulin. No insulin made. And so you are insulin dependent. I have to move myself because, okay. In type 2 diabetes is not so much autoimmune, but this is a lifestyle and genetic issue. If you're predisposed to type 2 diabetes, most likely you are glucose intolerant. And what happens here is with improper diet and lack of exercise, your cells become insulin resistant, meaning you have insulin, but your cells don't care about it. And so you end up with the high blood glucose levels. Anybody with diabetes that's uncontrolled, if you have diabetes, you're going to have very high blood glucose levels. And the reason you have high blood glucose levels is either, it depends on the type of diabetes, you don't have insulin, or in the case of gestational type 2, you have insulin, your cells just are not responding to them whatsoever. And now I want to bring up to this guy right here, latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. Sometimes you hear about adult onset diabetes. Well, that's either going to be this kind, and they're like, no, it's like type 1. Well, this is more like type 1 because it is an autoimmune disorder, but it occurs in adults. Type 1 is usually diagnosed in childhood. Type 1 diabetes is the hardest to control. Type 2, because it's lifestyle. If you know anything about type 2 diabetes, they'll tell you to don't eat high carbs, exercise, and stuff like that. And the reason is you don't want your body to have to handle the carbohydrates, but if you exercise, you literally make more insulin receptors on your cells. You can call that upregulation if you want to, but it really helps fight off the type 2 diabetes. All of these, you have increased blood glucose levels, and what that does, you're going to see all these symptoms over here. But before you get to these emergency symptoms, if you're walking around with diabetes and you don't feel bad or anything like that, and you're like, I'm fine, yes, my blood glucose levels are high, but I don't care, I don't feel anything. What those high blood glucose levels are doing is they are, I don't want to say attacking, but let's just say attacking all of your blood vessels. They destroy your blood vessels, the excess blood glucose. And so if you think about parts in your body where you have the smallest blood vessels, say your eyes, what happens if you destroy those? Well, there's blindness. What happens if you destroy the blood vessels in your brain? Well, then you could have a stroke. What about the heart? A heart attack. So all of these risk factors that have to do with diabetes not being able to heal. That's because there's no blood flow to the skin, like up to the feet. If you get a sore, you might not even know you have a sore. Neuropathies, etc. It's all because of your blood vessels. And blood vessels go throughout your entire body. So the reason I get up on this platform and talk about this is to make sure that you understand that diabetes is a big, huge deal. It affects everything in the body. How about your kidneys? Your kidneys filter your blood. The kidneys manage high blood pressure. They control blood pressure. So they're super important organs. And if you destroy the blood vessels in the kidneys, then you destroy your kidneys. And no one wants to be without their kidneys. Okay, so if you get diagnosed as pre-diabetic, that would fall in this range right here, type 2. Please make sure that you watch your diet a little better. I'm not saying lose 30 pounds. I'm saying watch your diet and exercise. Exercise is a key to staving off type 2 diabetes. Okay, and with this new type diabetes right here, it's falling in with type 1 because they're both autoimmune. Type 2, easy to control if it doesn't go too far. It's easier to prevent than to get and try to control. But you can be diagnosed with type 2 and go backwards. Type 1, if you're diagnosed, you have it. It's incredibly hard to manage blood glucose levels in a type 1 diabetic, regardless of how hard they are trying. They can be doing everything right and still not be able to regulate their blood glucose levels. So that type 1 diabetes is a super difficult disease to handle. And in that case, in all the cases of the diabetes, I suggest if you have family members that have diabetes, eat like you're diabetic yourself, because you really need to support someone with diabetes. Otherwise, they can't do it by themselves. Okay, so what are the symptoms, the cardinal symptoms of diabetes? Well, polyphagia means you're very hungry. Polydipsia means you're very thirsty. Polyuria means you are urinating a lot. Poly means many, which you're getting right now. Why are you very thirsty? Well, if you have diabetes, you have excess blood glucose levels in your blood. This is BG, excess blood glucose levels. And usually as blood goes to the kidneys, glucose does get into the urine, but then in the kidney tubules will take every glucose molecule out of the urine and put it right back into the blood, reabsorb the blood glucose. And that's a good thing. But if you have too high blood glucose levels, it overwhelms your kidneys. And so the glucose levels spill over into your urine. That means you get glucose in your urine. You're not supposed to have glucose in your urine. Glucose acts as an osmotic diuretic. That means it pulls water. So if you have glucose in your urine, it will pull water from the blood into the urine. And diuretic, makes you go to the bathroom. So glucose in the urine will have that draw on water, pull the water into your urine, and then you'll be urinating a lot. Well, if you've got polyuria and you're urinating a lot, well, that can lead to dehydration. Dehydration is going to lead to this symptom of polydipsia, being very thirsty. So constantly drinking to replace the blood volume you are losing through urine. Polyphagia comes in, being excessively hungry and losing weight, comes into the fact that this. If you have diabetes that's uncontrolled, you are unable to get glucose into your cells. And your cells need glucose to make ATP, aerobic respiration. So what will the cells do? They'll start breaking down fats and proteins in the body to try to produce more glucose. So literally, it's like your cells are starving regardless of the fact that they have tons of glucose. So you can lose weight and be excessively hungry. And that is the symptom polyphagia. And we're assuming that you are uncontrolled at this point. So let's walk through these leading to these most serious symptoms down here. Here are the cardinal signs. How's that? And then we're going to lead to the serious symptoms. If you can't take glucose up by the cells, then you're going to start breaking down glycogen because your cells are like, I don't have any glucose. So the liver and the skeletal muscles break down glycogen. That increases blood glucose levels more. And then your cells aren't making the glucose. So you start making glucose from non-carbohydrate products. That means you're going to be breaking down things like fat. So you increase your fatty acids in the blood. Your blood glucose levels are going up. Your blood lipids are going up because you're breaking down your fat because your body thinks you're starving. And when you break down fats, you produce these things called ketones. Ketones are acidic. They are acidic. And your blood pH needs to be between 7.35 and 7.45. If we go in this way range, we're becoming acidic. If we drop down to 7.30, 7.25, that's acidic. This is alkaline going in this direction right here. And so the more ketones you have, we are getting more acidic with our blood. This is our blood pH, the power of hydrogen, the measure of free hydrogen ions in solution. Ketones add excess hydrogen ions to the solution. And so that's when you end up, this hyperglycemia is due to extra blood glucose. Hyperlipidemia, you're breaking down your fat, so you have excessive fatty acids. And because the breaking down lipids leads to ketone production, you end up in a state of ketoacidosis. So not good, not a good state to be in. You don't want your blood levels to become too acidic. Acids have a way acidic solutions have a way of unraveling proteins, and you've got tons of different types of proteins in your blood. And so we don't want the breakdown of our proteins. All right. So all of these lead to, you've got excess glucose in your blood, and the kidneys can't handle that. So glucose spills over into the urine. That is glycosuria. And then you have ketonuria. And with ketonuria, what we're talking about is these ketones start spilling over in your urine. Bad, bad, because then that's going to cause an electrolyte imbalance. It's going to cause an acid-base balance. You're going to lose your water, you're going to lose electrolytes, and your pH is going to be off. And that leads to these symptoms right here. All the ketones add to this because you have a certain breath. A fruity breath, that's how they describe it. If you smelled it, you know it. That is due to ketones. The loss of electrolytes leads to vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain, which you can lose more electrolytes, and which can cause cardiac irregularities. And ultimately, you can end up with your central nervous system being depressed and going into a coma. So diabetes it's really important to take care of people with diabetes and support them, because most likely, depending on your genetics, you're going to end up with diabetes like all of us. I always assume I'm going to develop type 2 diabetes, and I'll lead a lifestyle to prevent that. I'm very paranoid about it. Okay, that's about it. Except for, let me pause, because we're gonna bring this concept in called, pause this recording. Pause this recording. Here we go. Now it was a smooth transition, I'm gonna have to say. Okay, about the excess hydrogen ions caused by the ketones. Remember that we have the bicarbonate carbonic acid buffer system, one of the greatest stories of all times. You have water and you have carbon dioxide. You are going to use this all semester long. If you combine these, if you combine water and carbon dioxide, now by the way, all this buffer system is in your blood. If we combine water and carbon dioxide, we get something called carbonic acid. 2 H's, 1 C, 2, 3 oxygens to balance this out. This is called carbonic acid. Now, if carbonic acid breaks down, because we've made it more than it should be, usually this is all in balance, then it will release hydrogen ions. If we take one hydrogen off here and one electron, we end up with a hydrogen ion. And the group of cells left over is the other hydrogen, CO3, HCO3. Look, we have a positive here. We have to balance it out. This positive means this hydrogen atom lost an electron, and now it's charged. It's an electrolyte. We call that a hydrogen ion, and this guy will receive the electron. This is a bicarbonate ion. These are electrolytes because they carry charge in a solution. Now, normally this is in perfect little equilibrium to keep our blood pH between 7.35 and 7.45. Well, what happens when we have diabetes and we're breaking down our lipids and we're forming all those excess hydrogen ions? Well, we're adding hydrogen ions here, and anytime you add something here, we're going to move in this direction to try to reach equilibrium. And what happens is, if you have excess hydrogen ions because of breaking down ketones, ketones release hydrogen ions, so we're adding hydrogen ions into the system, then you go in this direction and you make more of this, carbonic acid. Well, now we've got a lot of hydrogen ions still coming in, and we're making more carbonic acid. So the best thing we can do is break that carbon dioxide, that carbonic acid down to the water and the carbon dioxide. So you're like, why are you telling this? Well, this is a story of metabolic acidosis. If you're in a state of metabolic acidosis, you are trying to bind these hydrogen ions up. Because if we take these hydrogen ions, these are the only thing that contribute to the pH. pH is the power of hydrogen, specifically the power of the hydrogen ion. So if we can bind that hydrogen ion up and it's not free hydrogen ions, this is a free hydrogen ion, not married to anyone, it's going to contribute to pH. And in this case, the more hydrogen ions you have, the lower your blood pH. So when we combine it to form carbonic acid, that's getting rid of some of those hydrogen ions to try to maintain us within this range right here. So we combine these guys and we make carbonic acid, and then we've got a lot of carbonic acid, so we break it down. Well, now we end up with a lot. The water we're not so worried about. There's water everywhere in your body, but what about the carbon dioxide? How can we get rid of carbon dioxide? Well, you know how do you get rid of carbon dioxide? You breathe it out. And so someone who has metabolic acidosis caused by diabetic ketoacidosis can end up with their respiratory system compensating, meaning how does your respiratory system come to the aid of your bicarbonate ion carbonic acid buffer system? This is our buffer system. It's in our blood. It's always doing its job. In the case of this metabolic acidosis, aka diabetic ketoacidosis, when we're adding these hydrogen ions in, it overwhelms the buffer system. So then we need our lungs to rescue us, and that's called respiratory compensation. So someone who is in a really bad way, and diabetic ketoacidosis increases their breathing rate to try to get rid of, they hyperventilate to try to get rid of this carbon dioxide. And I know the word for this process, but I dare not say it, not allowed. I will butcher, I'll say it in class when I don't have any witnesses, I will butcher the pronunciation of it. So that is what's a big deal. A big deal about too much hydrogen ions. And we're going to see this equation again in the blood chapter and in the respiratory chapter. So endocrine, blood, respiratory, and maybe one other the urinary chapter. So get used to this and know your bicarbonate carbonic acid buffer system. Okay, we're really going to finish this lecture. We're going to end up with just a few out there endocrine organs, meaning we don't have to add a lot about it. But melatonin is produced by the pineal gland. And if you remember where your pineal gland is, in the pineal gland, it secretes melatonin, and this is your sleepy hormone. Now, when do we release melatonin? At night. And that's because the retina of the eyes takes in these light rays and sends information to a part of our hypothalamus, the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This is our biological clock. Takes that information there, and then straight to the pineal gland. Now, on this picture, I'm having a hard time following how we're getting over here to the pineal gland, but it is the sleepy hormone, and what's going to happen is as the light rays go down, it stimulates the hypothalamus to tell the pineal gland to release melatonin, and melatonin makes you sleepy. So this hormone has a diurnal fluctuation according to dark. People who work night shift have a lot of problems sleeping because they're up when it's dark and trying to sleep when it's daytime. And other people who have problems with this hormone are teenagers. You know, if you remember your teenage period where, like, I think mine was in middle school, where I was up until like 4 o'clock in the morning watching, it was used back in the day, it was called Nick at Night, watching all these old shows that would be on until 4 o'clock, and then I'd finally fall asleep. But that's because teenagers don't produce melatonin as quickly as the rest of the population. It's delayed onset of the release of melatonin. And so they tend to pick up sleeping, going to bed really late at night. But what you have to realize is there's going to come a point where you can't do that anymore, that you will be sleepier earlier on. Don't fight it, college students, sleep. Okay, the gonads, although we do this during the reproductive system, we'll just quickly brush on the fact like luteinizing hormone stimulates the production and the release of the gonadal hormones. So luteinizing hormone is responsible for the testes producing testosterone testosterone and the androgens, and it stimulates the production and release of the ovaries with the estrogen. Progesterone is not triggered by that, but anyway, so our gonads, what do they produce? When it comes to the ovaries are going to produce estrogen and progesterone. And estrogen is that hormone that's really necessary for our secondary sexual characteristics, meaning it makes females look like females down to the bone structure, like the bones of the hips and etc. So estrogen is responsible for developing those secondary sexual characteristics. And estrogen also helps to mature gonads. Hold on here. Pretend like it's that. Progesterone means progestation, growing a baby. And so estrogen levels will go up, and then estrogen levels will start to fall down. Progesterone goes up after estrogen levels because when an egg is ovulated, that follicle that it comes from turns into something called a corpus luteum, and it produces progesterone. So estrogen and progesterone are going back and forth like this. Together, estrogens and progesterone work for breast development and the changing of the uterine lining during the menstrual cycle. When it comes to testosterones, they're mainly the maturation of the gonads, development of sperm, secondary sexual characteristics, and sex drive. It's everything most people think of when they think of testosterone. The testosterones a lot of testosterone is made by the testes, a lot of estrogen is made by the ovaries and progesterone. Remember that your adrenal glands, the zona reticularis in particular, can also produce the androgens and estrogens. Our last but not least, I think, nope, kind of. You have this organ called the thymus. This is what it looks like underneath a microscope. It has an outer cortex and a medulla. These stain, it looks like just a bad dye job to me, right? And so that's how I recognize the thymus. It's got many lobes. Here's the heart right here, down here. It's a long, and your aorta comes off of the heart, and the blood vessels go in and out right here. And this is showing you a young person. Look how large that thymus is. That thymus is responsible for the maturation of certain lymphocytes called T cells. So it helps with immunity. Just think straight away the thymus helps with immunity. And how it does that is it produces a variety of hormones called thymosins and thymopoietins. Throughout time, the thymus atrophies and turns fibrotic with age. Like if you try to find a thymus on an older cadaver, it's going to be very hard to find. I've only found one thymus, to be honest with you, in all my life, and I was very giddy about it. And I have a picture, and maybe I'll show you. Maybe I'll show you if you're lucky. All right. Other hormone-producing structures, just so you know that the heart is not an endocrine organ, but remember, it produces atrial natriuretic peptide if your blood pressure is too high, in an attempt to get rid of salt through urine. Your gastrointestinal tract, we're going to, when we go over the GI system, the enteroendocrine cells of there produce lots of different hormones that affect other digestive organs. Like for instance, if you put food into your stomach will produce a hormone that goes lower downstream to the small intestines and the large intestines and say, hey, get ready, food is coming. And so the GI tract hormones are absolutely fascinating. Gastrin would be one of them. If you have a placenta, the placenta can make estrogens and progesterone, and this is that pregnancy hormone, human chorionic gonadotropin. So that's not only produced by the placenta, it's produced by the fetus. So this is what pregnancy tests test for. If you get a positive pregnancy test, it can be a false positive, but that's what it's checking for, because what are the structures that produce this? The placenta and the fetus. So you should be pregnant if HCG is present. All right, the kidneys. The kidneys release something called, this is for future, we've already gone over renin, because renin ultimately causes the release of aldosterone to raise blood volume and raise blood pressure. EPO stands for erythropoietin. Erythropoiesis is the formation of red blood cells. So EPO is the hormone goes to the blood, to the bone marrow, and tells there's a stem cell there to make more red blood cells there. So hormone that causes the production of red blood cells, which is erythropoiesis. I would leave it with just the production of red blood cells, but you have to know this in the next chapter. So we might as well start learning those terms now. Your skin produces the inactive form of vitamin D called calciferol, and then it can be activated to the activated form by the kidneys to calcitriol or calcitriol, however you want to say that. I like calcitriol. The adipose tissue in your body, this is interesting to me. It's always been interesting that several hormones are produced, leptin, resistin, adiponectin, and I put these, this is a little dyslexia here. Nectin, okay, they all have to do with basically tricking your mind to think that you're full. So supposedly when your adipose tissue releases these hormones, it switches off that switch in our brain in the hypothalamus saying, oh, I'm not satisfied, I'm not satiated yet. So supposedly these hormones help us from becoming overweight. But I think if you are like me, my adipose tissue is not doing its job. Okay, that's the end of the endocrine system. Congratulations, we made it through. Now there's a test.